Hello, everyone. I know this is a bit of a different video than you're used to because normally I cover esports stuff. This is a little different. I am here at Dragonsteel headquarters. Can I call it Dragonsteel headquarters? I can call it Dragonsteel headquarters, where I'm going to be doing this interview you're about to watch with Brandon Sanderson. A lot of you know that Mark and I are huge fans of his work and talk about him all the time on Hotline League. So I'm here in Utah. I get to chat with him. I know a lot of you will really like this interview because you've become fans, possibly even through what Mark and I talk about. But also some of you might be like, what is this? Please bear with me and let me have this. I gave you all this world's content, so give me this. Anyway, enjoy the interview. Hello, everyone. I am in Utah right now in a very unconventional place for me, content-wise. This is not your typical esports interview. I'm joined again by Brandon Sanderson for interview number 2, a couple years later, new Cosmere book.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me into your awesome facility, and I've really enjoyed checking it out.
It's my pleasure.
Yes. So we are just on the heels of... you call it Dragonsteel or Dragonsteel Con. It was Dragonsteel Mini Con at one point in time.
Yeah.
What is it now?
I just call it Dragonsteel 2022, but
Okay.
it's probably going to either be Expo or Con, depending on how we decide to brand it.
Yes.
I kind of like Expo because then it could be like Drax or Drex or
That's pretty
something
cool,
like that.
yes.
You know, stealing the PAX format on that one. But
Yeah.
no, a lot of my team likes Con. I didn't like Mini Con because it felt weird. So anyway.
Well, it's no longer Mini,
Yes,
based
it's
off
no
of
longer
what I
Mini.
experienced. Yes.
No. I mean, it's pretty substantial. So
Yeah, how was it for you, especially in comparison to last year? Because
Yeah.
you had, I think, rock music announcing you every time you came out, and huge audience. And
yeah. I mean, in the esports world, you're used to that sort
Yes,
of stuff.
yes.
I am not used to rock music announcing me. Usually, middle-aged guys in their 40s are not. Unless, like I joked at the thing, unless you're like some MLM dude, you're coming out to, cheer up the crowd or whatnot. I'm just a science fiction writer.
Yeah.
So that felt a little weird. I am used to large crowds because I've for a while been able to draw large crowds, and I've been at San Diego before where they put me and George Martin and people on a panel, but this was another thing entirely.
Yeah.
We filled a room of, like 6,000 people, which is just an incredible number.
Yeah.
And at the con, we had, 5,500, I think, or something like that. Or maybe, I think it was, I don't remember.
It sounds about right to me, based off of what I saw. Yeah.
Which is, 4 books. Pretty incredible. I walked out on the floor the first time after everyone was there, and I'm like, okay, this is different.
Well, and especially given that this is exclusively for you, right? Like whenever you go to Comic-Con or something like that, there's all sorts of people there for all sorts of reasons. Like these people drove or flew or ran, I guess, to the Salt Palace specifically to see your stuff. So was it intimidating at all, or are you just perfectly comfortable now?
It's intimidating because it's a different beast when you're running your own, right? It's a different beast because now everyone there, it's up to me ultimately to make sure they have a good time.
Right.
If I go to another con, I have to make sure my panels people have a good time at. But the whole thing isn't my fault if it goes wrong. The buck stops here if things go wrong with me, and so that part is intimidating.
Well, how do you feel it went?
I feel it went well, but really we put out like a survey. We're going to find out from the fans how it went.
Okay.
That's really that. I saw no big problems, but I get picked up basically and moved like a piece on a board from place to place. You're like, all right, here you are, do this thing. Now here you are, do this thing.
And so now it's time for the critics to weigh in, I
Yes,
guess. Yeah,
yes,
exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Lost Metal coming out, or it has come out officially now. Does it? I know you got this question a couple times, but it's I've got to ask it. Does it feel strange to be finishing a series? Because this does not happen very often for you.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often for anyone that you finish a series. There's a lot of authors that they'll finish 1 or sometimes 0 in their whole lifetime. And so wrapping something up, there's a certain strange, well, maybe it's not strange, maybe it's a normal sense of melancholy you get, where all the time working on a series, you love it because it's what I love to do, but it's also a little bit of a burden. Once you start a series, you've made a promise to fans. And until that promise is fulfilled, there's some sort of burden looming over you that you're like, I still need to close this loop. I owe them this. But then once you do so, at the end, it's like, oh, I'm done. I'm not going to be revisiting these characters anymore. This world, at least in its current incarnation, I'm not going to be revisiting. It's finished. There'll be characters that in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, that's a good line for this character.
Yeah.
I save up Wayne quotes, right? And just kind of jot them down. And that's been my habit for 10 years now. And now, the series is finished.
Yeah.
We're going to jump forward in Mistborn, and there's not really opportunity for more of those to be used. So,
one thing that you talked about at the party, the release party last night, was you're like, okay, hands off on keeping Cosmere
gloves
stuff.
Off. Yes, gloves off. Yeah.
Yes, fair. But thank you for the correction.
Yeah.
Editorial advice. Yes, gloves off on keeping the Cosmere stuff separate now between everything. Was this, you had talked about this, I think, on your stream for a little while, where you're like, we're gonna have a talk soon. I assume this was the talk.
This was the talk. So 4 years, for those who might not be familiar with my work, one of the things I wanted to do from the beginning was create a kind of larger continuity across series. I had seen some authors do this. The key one was Isaac Asimov, was really influential in me. I read, if you're not familiar with his work, he had two giant series, the Robot series and the Foundation series, what he's known for. And I read these when I was a teenager. And then in the later books of the Foundation series, they intermixed and became the same series. And that blew my teenage mind, where I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Now, of course, even he wasn't the first one probably to do something like this. I mean, Marvel had been doing it for years in the comic books when he connected them. But he was one of the early authors to do this, because I think he was writing these books in the 80s when he was making these crossover occur. And that was really influential on me. And I am lucky that I started doing this right before the MCU, when at a time when people wanted this. But when I started, the conventional wisdom was, this is going to scare people, right? And there's legitimate reason for that. What you don't want someone to do is read a book and feel lost because they haven't read another book not in that series, right? That's a danger. And I kind of dislike it when comics go too far on this, where it's like, you must read this issue of this issue of this issue of this, and the next issue is this, and you're just lost. You're like, how do I keep track of this crossover event? Can't you just publish them as their own event comic and things like that? But of course, they want to bolster the sales of everything. Right. My goal is not that, but at the same time, I do want these things to cross over. There are characters that I've been kind of holding back a little bit and being like, all right, I can't say all the things I want to say because I'm too afraid that I'm going to lose people. Yesterday, I kind of made the announcement. I'm like, I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I have enough series. Like where you start on Brandon Sanderson, any of the places you start, you're not going to feel lost that way. Over time, you're going to see other characters come in, and I'm planning to write them all in such a way that you don't need to have read anything else, but I'm also not going to hold them back.
So I was going to ask, this decision for this book in particular, was this more out of desire or necessity to start doing this?
It was a mix of both. I would say it's more desire. There's some things I wanted to get in. This book introduces a character from a world we haven't visited yet, who has a completely new magic system that is just kind of part of the story. And I was really hesitant about putting this character in because it's like people, you could feel lost, even though there's no book for this character's backstory yet. Where I'm like, but I thought, this is the character I want in the story. This is the story I want to write. I'm just going to put him in. I'm just going to do it. And it worked wonderfully. I love how it worked in the story. And at that point, I'm like, this has got to be the moment. This is the gloves off, as I said. The reason the gloves off is it's like, before I've been kind of pulling my punches a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess this metaphor is kind of mixed because usually you put the gloves on so you don't have to pull punches.
Yes.
But that's not how the linguistics work. When you take the gloves off, you're like going bare knuckle. You're like, I'm raw. I'm gonna, but it is a weird metaphor.
Yeah, yes. But an apt one, perhaps, even as odd as it was. One of the things I know you've talked about previously is when you are not usually surprised by fan reception because you have beta reads and all these different things. What is your anticipation for Lost Metal? Do you think that there's
Yeah.
going to be any kind of pushback where people are like,
yeah.
hey, this is too much?
I do think that a certain percentage of the audience will push back. Gauging based on the beta reader comments, there were some people that this was a bit too much for. And so I'm anticipating some of that. It was a small voice, and I did what I could to mitigate it. That's why we do the beta reads, so that I'm aware and I can try to, in revision, mitigate it as much as possible. But at the end of the day, it is the story I wanted to tell. So I expect there will be some people that this isn't quite the right story for them. And that's okay. That's one of the things you have to get used to as a writer is no story is going to be the perfect story for everyone.
Yeah.
You want to make sure your stories are the perfect stories for someone. My editorial VP, Peter, often uses this phrase, Brandon, make sure every chapter is somebody's favorite. It doesn't have to be everyone's favorite. And this is, I think, a good guiding principle in writing. What we don't want are lukewarm books that everyone is like, it was okay. You want books that are doing things that inspire a lot of passion from people. And anything that inspires passion is going to inspire it both ways.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask similar to this, and I will avoid spoilers for the time being towards the end. But in reading Rhythm, you went pretty in depth into some of the mechanics on certain things in that book, shall we say? Was it? Do you feel like there was a similar situation there, where like, because it goes pretty far in, and I love that stuff, but I do wonder if on your end you saw similar effects where people are like, okay, you're kind of losing me in some of this.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen. It does happen. But writing is all about, like, one of the keys of revision for me. One of the most important parts of it is, like, in your first draft, you're just trying to lay down plot, character, theme, these things. Just get the raw versions of these. Revision is refining, and one of the key things you do is find those places where people get lost and do a better job. It happens a lot in fight scenes. Fight scenes, for me at least, my first drafts, they can often be really hard to track. And I think it's actually kind of, here's a weird metaphor. You ever been to the dentist where you get like a crown put on or something like that?
Yeah.
What they do is they put this like piece of paper thing in your mouth, and you're like, all right, bite down so we can see where the friction points are, so we can then grind the tooth down to make it fit better. That's what a beta read is for me. Find those friction points. Find the places where I thought it was clear, but it's confusing, or where I did something that lost people in any way, whether it's world building or whether it's characterization or plotting, whatever it is. Find those friction points, grind them down, make them work.
Well, while Lost Metal has been anticipated for a while, you had another story or narrative that came out this year that I think a lot of people were not expecting, which is Moonbreaker.
Yes, yes. We are on a video game channel right now.
Yes, and so that is, I wanted to dive in. We talked about this in the last interview with some of my friends about your video game stuff, but now you have one that you've actively contributed to in a very meaningful way. What was the process like working on that?
So it was really interesting. I was working with Unknown Worlds, who made Subnautica, and I thought that their world building in Subnautica was pretty solid. They thought that they hadn't done that much. They're like, we don't know what we're doing, and I'm like, yes, you do. You really do. But I have much more of a formalized style for doing this because I've done it. I've written 50 books now. And many of those books are in brand new worlds. And so I said, here's my format. And they're like, great, show us how to do it. And I built them an outline, not a story outline, but a world outline, a world guide, as I call it. And I then, built it as a skeleton. And then I filled in all the pieces as I was going. And I did it just like I would write a book. But there was one key difference. And this is that no matter how good the world building is for a video game, if the gameplay isn't fun, then the game's going to fail. And so I couldn't have any really influence over that, but I could tell them, don't let my world building be the thing that makes you make bad gameplay decisions.
Yeah.
Always understand, I will change the world building to fit good gameplay, no matter what it takes, because there's that. And in narrative, there's a bit of that too, right? World building should, I think, be the third most important behind plot and character. You want your world building to enhance that, not to be a good unto itself. But it was much more so in the video game.
You've implied in the past that many different companies have reached out to you about potentially collaborating on some sort of video game. Why was this the one that you decided to go for?
It was a couple of reasons. Number one, I like to do different things. A lot of the things I was being pitched were games that were very similar to the games on the market now. Moonbreaker made something that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's probably its greatest strength and its greatest weakness because video games are very hard to market something brand new. And this was a digital minis game that they pitched and they made. I think it's really fun. A digital minis game where you're playing basically something like old HeroClix, small squad-based minis game, but done digitally and with a painting aspect and stuff like that. I just thought it was really different. You know, I didn't make the decision based on what I thought would sell the best, honestly. I based it on what I thought was the most interesting pitch.
Yeah.
I had just played Subnautica, which I thought was really well done. And my children love Subnautica. And so I'm like, I'm going to pick this one.
So I imagine Skyward was a pretty good opportunity for you to kind of train yourself a little bit on sci-fi stuff.
Yes.
I'm curious if this experience was similar for training yourself on video games. And I know you talked before about like it costs a lot of money to make a video game, but I am curious if this is, you're like, hey, this will at least let me dip my toes in the water if you do decide to do something bigger in the future.
Yeah, I think that this was a really good, like, one of the reasons I did this is I'm like, I want to be involved in someone else's video game before I do one of mine.
Yeah.
Right? And I would like to do video games based on my works. I mean, I'm a gamer. I had an Atari 2600 when I was a kid. That's where my entry point was. And I have lots of ideas for games. I have a really cool idea I've been working on for years that I would love to tell. And I want to see this world a little bit more. That's kind of just been my philosophy, both in video games and in film and television. I'm like, let me see how they do things before I stomp in and decide to do it my way.
Well, yeah, I was going to talk to you about that too because we were just chatting a little bit before this about Arcane,
yes,
which I saw on the show that you really enjoyed doing. And it feels like to me there's such an interesting confluence occurring right now between like books, you know, with like Witcher and game. You've got games and you've got like League moving into TV stuff. All like books, games, and television/movies. It feels like there's just this interesting thing that's happening between the three of them.
Well,
and as a creator, I'm curious what you think. Yeah.
For years, the prevailing wisdom was there were no good video game to movie or television adaptations, right? And this kind of even helmed through the Mortal Kombat era, even though the Mortal Kombat movies, some of them were really fun.
Yeah.
Right? There were no great ones. But we can't say that anymore. I mean, you named Witcher and Arcane, which I think both are great, like legitimately great. And Witcher went to books, but here we have Arcane that I gave it a 10 out of 10. I think it's a fantastic narrative. And so we're at an era where these sorts of things, video games as narrative, are being taken seriously, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the Last of Us being adapted, which is a weird one for me because I feel like The Last of Us doesn't need to be adapted because it already told its story so well.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how Hollywood is, right? It's like, oh, it worked really well. Well, we'll make that. What's really interesting about Arcane is it's like, how do you make this story? Like, I haven't played League a lot. I know. Am I in trouble for saying that?
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Many people would tell you that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's got love-hate relationship that fans have.
That's kind of the thing. Like, I'll watch, video game content. Like, I'll watch Donkey.
Yeah,
and people who played a lot of League of Legends often say, oh, they have a love-hate relationship with it.
Oftentimes they enjoy the game, but they don't enjoy maybe some of the social experiences.
Yes, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
But regardless, but I've read up on it when Arcane came out, and people are like, what? There's so many stories, but so much bare bones to them.
Yeah.
And then you have something like that come out. And I think we are, with the streaming services, kind of in this golden age of narrative, particularly kind of the middle form. We used to have short form films and long form television, which was seasons and seasons and seasons. Yeah. And now we've got this middle form, which is self-contained season, miniseries essentially, done very, very well. And I think it's opening opportunities for new storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, as you look at your own work, I assume it must be really exciting to see sort of, again, all of these things converging
Yeah.
into something, because it probably gives you some ideas for the future.
It does. It does. Though in some ways it's kind of daunting, right? Like the gold standard right now for budgets is Lord of the Rings. And everything is going to be compared to it now. And it had like $60 million an episode.
Right.
Which it's like, how do you do something that compares with that? That's also suddenly very daunting. It's like, oh, great. Now the gold standard has 5 times the money of everyone else. So it kind of is this odd place that it puts us in.
If you had to, at some point in time, make a decision on like where to focus your efforts in terms of either movie, TV show, or video game stuff, I mean, where would you kind of make this decision?
That's a good question.
As a fun analogy, I've kind of been thinking about these things as the in the terms of realmatic theory, where you have all these 3 things existing against each other. So yeah, I'm curious where, because you're a gamer at heart, so I imagine that's tempting.
I am a movie buff also.
Oh, that's true. That's
right? So what you're saying is someone comes to me and says, it's Morpheus. Here are your 2 choices.
Sure.
You take this one and this one goes away. You can either make a video game and you have an unlimited budget and you can do it exactly as you want, or you can make a television show with unlimited budget and do it as you want.
Or, I mean, that's that one, or even just like, if these 2 projects sprung up simultaneously, and you have to focus on these because you're writing at the same time, I know.
Right. It's going to depend. Like, I don't think that I have the skill set to write a film. Main reason being films are short form.
Yeah.
They're like the cinematic equivalent of a short story, which I can do, but I'm not, it's not my skill set. Television show, having worked on the Wheel of Time, having seen a lot of scripts and things, is my wheelhouse, right? So if it's a film, I think it's better for me to let someone else write the screenplay. If it's a television show, I can write teleplays, right?
Yeah.
I can do long form. You give me 10 episodes, and I can do it myself. Maybe not all of them, because that's a lot, but who knows? I mean, I do like to write a lot.
Yes.
And so that's going to be part of the decision point, right? And what kind of video game are we making? Do I get to do my own cool idea? It would have to be, there'd be a lot of decisions. I think writing a mini-series type thing, the 10-episode premium streaming, if that popped up and I had the right opportunity, I would probably pick that over the video game. But if it were video game versus film, I would probably do the video game.
You've somewhat implied that you have this idea on a video game that you'd like to explore at some point in time. Is that, I think a lot of people, when they hear like, oh, maybe a Brandon Sanderson video game, they're like, oh man, Mistborn or Stormlight or something like that. It sounds like maybe this would be something completely out of there.
So having been a gamer, I would want to design a video game that the narrative plays in the strength of video games. I wouldn't want to simply adapt one of my books. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't put in the Cosmere. I might, but I wouldn't limit myself to that. I would want to do a game that I designed to fit the medium, the storytelling, to work with the type of story it is, right? So I've got several cool ideas that I think would make fantastic narrative video games, but we'll see. We'll see if I can ever do it. Someone out there wants to give me, $100 million. If From Software wants to come, I've got my Elden Ring sword there. I would totally be on board.
Yeah, I think it's always been fascinating for me, and I think for a lot of other gamers, to imagine some sort of Cosmere-themed video game, because so much of your books, like medals feel like a mana system or a resource system. I mean, they are, and so
they are. I think Mistborn will make a fantastic video game. Don't get me wrong. I think we are going to have one eventually. But the thing about that is, I can basically hand that off to someone.
Yeah.
Because I've already built the mechanics. I would have to help supervise, but I don't have to make that game myself.
Yeah.
The games I want to make, I would have to pitch and explain to people why these mechanics work, why the narrative works. There's not a lot of pitching I have to do for a Mistborn game. It makes sense to people because they've read the books.
Yeah. Are you playing anything these days? I know you destroyed Elden Ring. So
I did have a good time with Elden Ring, though. The final boss, Millennia, kicked me in the head.
Yeah.
It took 14 hours to beat Millennia for me, because I play for about 2 hours a day, and it took an entire week. I was severely underleveled, but I was too stubborn to go level up.
Yeah, I've seen your clips where you're like, oh, you collect these, you don't spend them.
The runes. I did end at 10 million.
Okay.
I ended my run. But that's what I've done in basically all Souls games is I level to where it feels like the right challenge level for me, and then I stop leveling for that region because otherwise I'll over level and I won't have the challenge. And that was easy all the way. Well, easy is the wrong term. I want a boss to take me a couple hours.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to a boss and beat it without having to learn the boss's play pattern and weaknesses and learn how to dodge their attacks. Like I want to get there and actually feel like I beat the boss. Right? Not that I leveled up so much that the boss, breathed fire on my toes and then I bonked it. And every other boss was about right. They were taking me, some took me only like 15, 20 minutes, some took me around 2 hours. And that's the right mode I'm looking for. And then, for one to take 14 hours. But I did get through all of that. Right now, I have not been playing anything specific. I do have, so when I'm deeply in writing, I try to stay away from getting sucked into a big game because it's better if I can take that 2 hours of free time and after I write just be decompressing on the game, on what I'm writing, rather than jumping into something that will dominate my attention. So right now I've only been playing a few little. I have the Google Play Pass.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of Lovecraft versus Tesla. Which is just a little indie game. Did not work for phone controls. It looked like a very fun game. It's one of these 10 tons twin stick shooters.
Yeah.
Crimson Land was one of theirs long ago that I really liked, but I couldn't get it to work on this, and so I've just been downloading a bunch of random games, looking for things that work on the phone that as I go to bed I can spend a half hour.
I know you're super into Magic, and you were doing a bunch of stuff for MTG Summit this past weekend, but do you play much Arena?
So I played a little bit of Arena, and it was dangerous.
Okay.
So I went in, I bought some, I sunk in some money to buy some tickets to play, and the fact that I could play Magic at any time against a faceless opponent, I did really well.
Right.
Like at the end I gave myself a month, but I wanted to play it too much. And at the end of the month, I still had all my points.
Yeah.
And so I had broken even. But I was not, it was not a good time. And so I swore off of Arena at that point. Just too much potential to be addictive.
Yeah.
This is why I don't play MMOs. I need things that end. I need things that I have a time period I play and that I'm done with.
Yeah. Well, I know we were talking earlier about adaptations and all that stuff. I know you can't talk about anything, but I do have questions kind of around what this time is for you, because I kind of feel like with the Kickstarter at the beginning of this year, with Moonbreaker, with all this conversation of stuff on the horizon for you, it feels like you are almost at the end of edge of a precipice in terms of what the future is like. Like I joked with friends that this will be the last time I interview you because you'll be on Fallon and Kimmel in the future. And I'm curious how much you feel that, because it's got, I mean, things are, your convention this year much bigger than the last one, right? And that's like a sign of kind of what I'm seeing with you.
There is that. I mean, we are strapping it. If adaptations do happen, then that's going to change things dramatically. But at the same time, how much have you seen George Martin on Kimmel?
Somebody else mentioned that to me earlier. I think Adam did.
Yeah.
But I mean, he does do the tour a decent amount. He shows up in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I mean, he went on
Conan.
Yeah, I think he went on Conan. I think he went on Conan. The fact that that Colbert likes fantasy so much maybe makes it more of a possibility. But I don't see. I mean, people don't want to see fantasy authors, right? They want to see the movie stars and things. I don't think that's going to happen that much.
Even then, it does feel like your life could change in pretty big ways, at least from the career perspective. And I'm curious if you spend a lot of time thinking about that.
I do, because there's a decent chance I'll have to be, if adaptations do happen, I'd have to be on set for part of them. That changes your life a lot, right? Yeah. If you're filming and things like that. And so it depends on how much I'm involved. How much am I on set? If I do a television show, like I would like to do, where I'm basically in charge, being a showrunner is a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, how does that affect? I had a teacher in college whose books were starting to sell pretty well and went to Hollywood to try to make films of his books. And it turned out to be a bad career move. I've always remembered it because he stopped writing the books. And then the books dropped off the list because when he came back a few years later, he wasn't, he'd lost his momentum and he didn't end up getting the films made. And so I've always remembered that. And Peter, again, my editorial VP, we were together in that class with that professor, and he's always remembered it. And he's brought it up a few times. He's like, let's make sure we don't do that, Brandon. Yeah. So the books have to keep getting written.
So even setting aside the book situation, I sometimes feel like you're almost playing like Jenga with your time.
I am.
And because even if you start doing that, if you're on set, you won't be doing maybe signing as many things here and doing that stuff, interacting with your community, all that.
Yeah.
So how do you spend time and are you worried at all about how do you manage all these things as you keep adding more things to the plate?
That's one of my biggest worries right there, because I never want to stop writing the books myself. And I want them to be regular and consistent. And how do I make sure that's come ask me in 5 years.
Okay.
How about that?
Well, maybe Kimmel will have to ask you. I'll submit that as a question for him. But I think similarly, I sometimes wonder. The last time I interviewed you, I talked about how I'm somewhat fascinated with you as an individual because there are so few people in the world who can say like, okay, so in about 15 years from now, I should be working on this specific thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like a very specific experience that not very many people have. And I'm wondering if you look at this too as almost like alternate timelines diverging off, where like as we go more into Hollywood and maybe video game, whatever fun adventures, things like Nightblood wink out of existence and Silence Divine and all these
that does
things.
happen. That sort of thing is a deep concern of mine because Stormlight and Mistborn need to remain consistent. And how much time do I have for the side projects? It's been kind of it's been a bit of a crisis for me, realizing that I don't get to write all the books I want to write.
Right.
And when am I going to get to them? The Secret Project grew out of that crisis, making me write more books. So maybe that will happen. I don't know. It's really hard to say. This is the key concern in my life right now.
Yeah. How much does it freak you out, for lack of a better term, whenever Stormlight gets pushed?
So Stormlight's only ever been pushed once, and I did it quite deliberately. And that was this last year where I pushed it because I knew that I needed more time on this one. It doesn't freak me out. Not very much does.
Okay.
It's more of a looming sort of be careful.
Yeah.
Right? Like this cloud behind me saying, don't let things slip too much. And I have to go to the team and I have to be like, look, we have to make sure we don't let things slip. Because if Stormlight slips, then everything else slips. As long as Stormlight is regular, then everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah. Kind of a fun question, but with Hollywood potential on the horizon, any chance that what started as a parody, B-Money, ends up becoming more of a thing?
I don't think B-Money will remain in his realm as the satire. I honestly don't see, like, here's the thing. I don't like all of that.
Yeah.
Like I have friends that what they love to do is go to the conventions and go to the parties and hang out with the celebrities, which is great. The celebrities, the movie stars and things, they're universally really nice people. I've never met one that I was like, oh, too bad that person's a jerk. Every one of them I've met has just been really charming and nice. I just don't like to go to parties. I want to be in my room playing a video game or reading a book, right? Like that's what if you give me time, here's an extra 2 hours. Do you want to go do you want to go hang out on this celebrity's yacht? I'm going to be like, no, put me on the beach, give me a laptop, let me write.
Yeah.
I've had those opportunities, and I have not taken them. And so I don't think you need to worry that Brandon's going to have fun off jet setting and not get the writing done because, You know, I have turned them down in the past. I am glad I have friends and business associates that they can go onto the celebrity's yacht and go schmooze and hobnob and all of this stuff. Well, I can sit at home and I can play video games.
Why not write from the yacht? I feel like that's probably a nice experience.
I think it would be kind of hard to write in the situations I've been in that I've been invited to. How about that?
Okay,
they're not the places where you're going to be quietly with a laptop.
Okay, maybe not celebrities, but what about creatives? Because I do think you really like hanging out with those folks.
Hanging out with creatives. I love going and doing dinner with directors and with writers and things like that. But you know, I have to eat dinner, and so going out to dinner with them and then going home and working, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm not worried about that aspect of it. What I am worried about is getting so deeply involved in the creative side of one of these projects that the books lapse, if that makes sense. Yeah.
What is the greater danger? An unlimited budget from a really great studio with a great creative team that you can dive in on, or unlimited access to MTG Arena?
MTG Arena would. I already have that, and I've said no. That is a much bigger danger.
Okay.
Because what you do. It's a vicious cycle, because if you play a draft, because I love to draft,
right,
and you win, you're like, I am top of this field, I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
If you lose, you're like, I was robbed, I can't believe they had that mythic, I have to do it again and prove that. And you just end up going back in the queue, right? Yeah. And so it is a vicious cycle.
I mean, same thing with season 1, season 2 of shows, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, this was highly rated, I have to go do season 2, or I got to prove them wrong with season 2.
Right. Well, this is this is true, but it at least is me creating something in that case,
that's
right?
Fair.
And scratching the creative itch is good for me. Playing video games is too. I sincerely believe that. Taking time off, relaxing, and experiencing another medium. But a healthy thing is to go play Elden Ring for 2 hours for me. Really get to experience the vision of some other creators. Get inspired for my own writing and go back. Unhealthy is, I have to jam this button in order to make this other number go up, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, here's what I want to do. You've been bothered by spoiler Q&A questions all week long, or at least for the last several days. But I have one for you.
Okay.
I'm going to put it after the end here for people who have not watched. It's a Way of Kings question. But,
okay, so here's the spoiler.
Well, but we'll wind down the interview so people can watch it post break. So before we get to the spoiler, thank you so much for the interview. Is there anything that you would like to say to, especially a lot of the gaming audience? Some of these folks probably watching this maybe not familiar with your work, or maybe have heard about it a ton but haven't dived in. But anything you want to say to anybody out there?
I mean, if you haven't tried my work, I do think Mistborn, sometimes in the UK they call it The Final Empire. It's the first book of the Mistborn trilogy. Is a really good match to people who grew up playing the games that I did and enjoy the sort of things that I do. It is not a video game book. It's not. There's this genre called lit RPG.
Yes,
it's nothing like that. It's an epic fantasy sort of thing. But I find that people who think like I do tend to really like my style of world building and stuff. And the main pitch on it is, it's what if the Dark Lord won? What if, I was reading Harry Potter when I came up, and like these Dark Lords, they always have this rough time. Some stupid kid beats them. They're the best in the world, but then this kid shows up and says, or some furry-footed British dude throws their ring in a hole, and that's the end, right? And so I thought, what if the Dark Lord won? So this is a world where the Dark Lord had won, and it's a heist story. It's about a team of thieves who are trying to rob the Dark Lord. And so it plays a little bit like Ocean's 11, a little bit like one of these kind of classic heists taking place in a world where, what if, Sauron had gotten the ring back, or what if, what if the Dark Lord and the Wheel of Time had won?
And where can people find Moonbreaker?
Moonbreaker is on Steam currently. I did all the world building and outlines for the characters, and we are releasing audio dramas that are your kind of onboarding to who the characters are. Those are written by Dan Wells, my good friend and my narrative VP at my company. And so those audio dramas are free to listen to. They're on podcast sites and things like that. You can go listen to them, get into the lore, and play the game. It's on Steam right now. It's in early access. It is a lot of fun. It's a digital minis game, and we kind of our pitch is it's better than miniatures because they act like little minis, but you can paint them in ways that would be very difficult to do in real life. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the interview. I'm looking forward to watching yours with Conan next year.
Yes, yes.
It'll be
Me
great.
and Coco.
Yes, yes, very good. All right, again, thank you so much. And now time for the spoiler question.
Spoiler question.
Okay,
All right.
so end of Way of Kings. Szeth meets. Oh, by the way, this is Warbreaker spoilers also.
Yes.
Szeth meets Nightblood. Nightblood normally makes people feel very sick and blah blah blah. Does the test.
Yes.
He does not have this, and I'm
He does
curious
not.
if there's a reason for that
Yeah.
other than you didn't want to end your book with Szeth puking in a corner.
No. So Nightblood. So what happens when you take Nightblood is based entirely on what your desire and how to use Nightblood is. If your intent does not align with Nightblood's created intent, which is kind of a deep kind of Cosmere sort of thing. But basically, if you want Nightblood because you can then destroy all of your enemies, you're not gonna match to that intent. If your desire to use Nightblood is either, number one, I don't even want to use Nightblood, you're actually going to be fine.
Okay.
Right? Or if your desire to Nightblood is matching what Nightblood's view is, and Szeth is like the perfect person because Szeth only wants to do what he's told, and Nightblood kind of only wants to do what he's told.
Okay.
And so there's like a perfect alignment. They're both messed up in the same way. And they're both kind of they both view the world in the same way. And they're just like, it's hard to find a more perfect alignment than those two.
Yeah.
And so because of that, there was just no reaction.
Yes.
And that should be something that I wanted people to pick up on.
Awesome. Well, I didn't. No, but that's good. It's good.
You
I
did.
really
You
appreciate-
asked the question,
I
so you
asked.
did.
I did ask the question. Yes, I'm sure now this will spawn a whole group of people shipping Szeth and Nightblood as a couple. Anyway, thank you so much again. Hopefully, people can deal with my spoiler question. But again, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah.